we're definitely past some couple of major milestones on No Man's Sky. Its development it's fun, you know. It's exciting. It's a game. Oh, all developers say this, but like as a coder, it's a super interesting game to work on. Like we're being quite selfish, I think, by trying to make something that we really enjoy making, you know. Like all the procedural stuff, it's all, you know, it's maths and science and stuff like that. And that's like, I could do that all day. If I wasn't doing this, I would do it in my spare time, that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fun. Being on camera and stuff, you know, not that I don't like you very much and things like that, but like, you know, probably less fun. Joe Danger, we did press for it. It wasn't necessarily very well planned or anything like that, or very well executed, but like we actually did way more press for Joe Danger than we've done for No Man's Sky. That might sound strange, but like with Joe Danger, we would have gone to every show. You know, we would have done every interview we could have. I would have gone to things like Gamescom or PAX, and you would have like a whole day of interviews, and you just like you were pushing the game on people, you know, because people weren't aware of it, and you just thought, if you could just hear about it, you'd like this game. If I could just get you to sit down and play it, and so that, you know, that was the thing you were doing all the time. No Man's Sky actually hasn't been like that at all. Like we did VGX like a year ago, and we did a day of press the day before that. We did maybe 4 or 5 outlets that we chatted to. And then we did E3 6 months later. And for the 3 days that we were out at E3, we did press those 3 days. And then that's been pretty much it until now, actually. So we might be more visible. Like No Man's Sky definitely seems to be a bit more visible than Joe Danger, and so people might be sick of us. But we haven't actually said that much about the game. It's actually quite nice to talk about it, you know, like, you know, and to talk about it to press and stuff, because it's pretty fresh, you know, to me. I actually find like if you try and explain anything to somebody new, like even if it's just some maths or something like that, like it will formalize in your head a lot better what it is you're trying to do. Right. We in terms of development, we go off on one. We like concentrate on these tiny little features that aren't actually that important, you know, sometimes. And it's actually nice to see other people, you know, demoing the game to like Game Informer and stuff. Actually, I'm watching reactions, and, you know, you guys don't notice some of the things that really bother me, and you notice some totally different things and stuff. And so it is, I actually find it pretty useful.
So it just kind of alternates where you're at your happiest when you can just sit down and code for weeks on end?
No, I'm definitely happiest if I can just be making the game. Like that's what you'd expect. You'd hope, you know, that I wouldn't be that into press and whatever. But like, it's not. I don't mind it when it's happening and stuff. And to be honest, we've worked like really solidly since E3. And when you're doing that, you're thinking, like, I can't wait until people see this, or I can't wait until people see that. And, you know, that's kind of the reward. Like, you want to get your head down and you want to focus and do nothing else. But then once you've done that, and once you've got new things, you do want to show people, you know.
So it's interesting talking to you before. You're so passionate about Burnout. You still love Burnout so much. You clearly love Joe Danger so much because they kind of gave you your independence. Do you think that you love No Man's Sky, you're enjoying development as much as those games? I think from the outside, people see it as, well, this is your passion project.
Right.
But I know that you're so passionate about those previous franchises too. Like, how does it compare in your mind?
Making games is like a weird thing to describe, I think, because it's a very personal thing. But I imagine people who like write a book, or people who are in a band, whatever. So you make multiple albums, or you make multiple books, or you work for Game Informer, and you do loads of different articles and things like that, and loads of different features. You've got certain things that you enjoy about everything that you're doing, like the process of doing it, like programming is a really fun thing, developing is really fun. So yeah, I'm definitely into what I'm working on, like as in it almost doesn't matter. There's a certain degree to which, as long as I'm coding and as long as it's a game that is fun to play, that is entertaining and that people enjoy, then I'm happy, Over and above that, with No Man's Sky, there is a pressure to an extent that is like, this needs to be right, and I've just got this one opportunity. And actually that's the biggest thing with say E3 or VGX, as people seem to be excited about it, I just feel that more like we have to not mess this up, so there's a certain pressure that goes along with that, but it's kind of nice, that does amp up when something does go right, you're like, oh, people are gonna love this, I'd take that any day over working on a game that people don't know about, or people aren't excited about, or whatever.
So how does the team deal with that level of hype out there? They must constantly read the Reddit threads and everything and see the excitement.
Yeah, it's really funny actually. I don't read any of the press or whatever, and I can't watch myself on camera, and I don't read comments and things generally.
You don't look in the mirror.
I don't look in the mirror. Well, that's obvious. But the rest of the team does, and gets a real kick out of it actually. And they really enjoy giving me a hard time. So if there's a new video that goes up or whatever, like this video, they will pick frames where my face is doing a really stupid thing, and then they'll just post those around or have them as wallpaper and things. So yeah, I do eventually get to see it. But I think overall you do, like any developer does, take a measure or barometer of overall what people are feeling about the game. Like you can't help but listen. But I don't pore over comments or things. I just find it's too stressful, basically.
So the team isn't pulling their hair out, reading those comments, being like, holy shit, people are looking forward to this. Because I understand you have a rough barometer, but you should know that people are really, really looking forward to this.
Well, we actually, because we do this stuff every 6 months, maybe we're fooling ourselves, but between VGX and E3, we kind of felt like people had kind of forgotten about the game a little bit. And certainly there wasn't as much talk about it, and I would see that there's not as many hits on things and stuff like that, and so I think it does kind of quieten down, and I like that that's good, and then it's nice to show people and get them excited about something new or whatever. I guess it's this double-edged sword, right? I wouldn't have it any other way, but of course there's pressure on the team to make sure that they get it right. The way they describe it to me is if one of the guys is making some art, right? Maybe one of the guys who worked on Joe Danger, right? There's an added pressure, which is we might be on stage at E3, or we might be on stage at PSX or something like that. And then you get the specs for the screens at these shows, and they're 90 foot by 140 foot or whatever. And then you're working on a blade of grass. And suddenly you're like, that blade of grass might be like the size of a man on screen, you know? And suddenly, like, it has to be right, and I have to think about my work that way. And that's maybe the like, you could see that as a downside, but you could also see the massive upside, which is like, what I'm doing, even when I'm doing the tiniest little detail, that is going to be seen, and it's going to be on this huge screen and stuff. And yeah, so you generally, you don't complain. It only hits you every now and then that you're like, oh God, you know, but it's a good thing, you know.
So what do you think has been the most surreal part of the publicity campaign so far? What has hit you the hardest?
The publicity campaign. We don't have a campaign. That gives us too much credit. That would have like a strategy and things like that. I think, like, when I worked on much bigger games, so I worked on like Black and Burnout, and we would get magazine covers and things like that. It meant something, but it's not the same as when it's your own game, you know, in your own studio and stuff. Like, that is something that's so surreal and kind of meaningful to me, to see a game on like the cover of a magazine. That kind of blows my mind a little bit. I think that's because I grew up with gaming magazines, you know, and I kind of grew up wanting to get into games, reading about games. That was kind of my, you know, whereas a lot of people growing up now, it will be more internet stuff and things like that. I think E3 was super surreal as well. The whole thing, like, I hadn't really been before, and yeah, that was a weird way to go for your first trip. E3 was a big deal for the game, you know. Like, the thing is that Hello Games actually has, like, and I know this from trying to tell people about Joe Danger, Hello Games, when it speaks, has a really small voice, you know, like it's a whisper, right? Because we're like a small indie studio, and there's only so much noise a handful of us can make. So we rely on something like BGX, which already has this built-in audience because of these far bigger games that are being shown. And the same with E3, this massive audience. After VGX, I kind of thought that was as big as it would ever get, you know. We had a whole bunch of views on our video and a whole lot of people interested and stuff. And I remember before we went out to E3, I kind of said to the guys, like, just so you know, that was the reveal, and that's the real big impact thing. And we're going to do E3, and it won't be as big, but don't be disappointed by that, you know. It's still a really important thing, and it's great to be on stage at E3 and stuff. And that was just before we flew out. And then, like, it was massive for us, you know, and loads of people that, like, get in contact with us and stuff, they think the game was announced at E3, you know, they'd never heard about it before or whatever. And that's probably the case with about 2 out of every 3 people or something who kind of know about the game. So, yeah, that was a huge deal for us, and really positive and stuff.
Do you expect PSX in past tense is going to be as big?
Oh God, I hope Sodi doesn't mind me saying this, but I presume not. Like, I'm assuming loads of really cool games are going to get announced and stuff like that, and like they will be game of show and all that. And I'm just excited for us to show more, you know, to people who are already interested in it and stuff. We're going to show like the galactic map for the first time, and I think hopefully that will give people a sense of the scale of the game. Like, I've said to people, you know, like 100 million stars and things like that before, and people kind of, they get that as a number. Like, even me, I knew that as a number, but then when I saw it for the first time, I was like, that's much more than what I thought, you know? Like, we have this phrase, like, you know, on Earth, where we will say, like, as many as there are stars in the sky or whatever, but you don't actually see that many stars in the sky. Like, you, in the city or whatever, you might see 2,000. On a perfect day, you might see 10,000 or something, and that seems like so many. but the galaxy is like hundreds of millions and stuff, and like conceptually you can't even get your head around that kind of number, actually. Like most of the time you're making the game and you're kind of actually oblivious to it. You're looking at some tiny microscopic detail and you're so focused on that. And like games development is weird because it's a technical endeavor, so you will be looking at the shadows being slightly wrong or something like that, and you'll be zoomed into the pixel level. And then every now and then I will do something with like E3 or something like that, where I'll have to take some screenshots for the press or record a video, and I'll just have to go out and fly around the universe and find some nice places to take a screenshot. That happens every few months, and suddenly I will just kind of go, oh my God, what are we making, you know? Like in both a good and a bad way, like, but it's this, that can be a really lovely moment actually, where you have been just down at the real pixel level, and then suddenly you are like, wow, you know, this is a real thing and it's a real game, and yeah, it's nice.
So what is the trickiest part of making this game that you didn't anticipate?
I think I didn't anticipate people being really into it. I didn't anticipate it resonating and stuff. So
you think that's difficult? Makes it more difficult?
I personally find going on stage at E3 like the hardest thing I've ever done. You know, like that's something that I would have had in a nightmare before. You know what I mean? It's
literally the hardest thing you've ever done?
Yeah. I think it would be for most people to stand up and talk in front of like 5,000 people and know that there's like several million watching at the time at home. And yeah, I almost don't think you're normal if you enjoy that, you know? So like I think stuff like that, but that's just, you know, there's good to that as well. Like I will always be happy that I did that, you know. I actually don't really get a buzz from it. I thought I would. I was wondering whether I would or not. I just felt, after E3, I just felt like empty, you know? Like I just wanted to sit. Everyone else, we were all around a table, because the whole team was there. And we were like all around this table, and like everyone was super excited and going through their phones on Twitter and shouting stuff at me. And I just sat there, just like in silence, you know, like what has just happened? I think it just brought me to the full edge of terror, basically, you know.
You just survived the shark attack.
Yeah. I just think I'm going to be having like nightmares about it for the rest of my life or something. But it was a really cool thing to do, you know, and like it's more for me, the buzz of that is more that the game did that, you know, rather than, I don't care that I stood up on stage. Like I would care about it if I stood up and I did something amazing, you know what I mean? Like I broke out into this song number or something, you know, and it really pulled it off, right? But the reality is like, I just stood up and mumbled some stuff, and like, but the game, it's amazing to have made something and for that to be on the screens and stuff, you know, on Sony's big telly kind of thing. It's like really cool to see that. There are unique details to making something of this scale that even though I'm reasonably experienced in that I've done a bunch of games before, you're not prepared for, like, and that people haven't really done before. It's really interesting to talk to other programmers and other developers about just the kinds of problems you have to deal with being able to land on a planet and travel at, you know, hundreds of thousands of kilometers an hour, and to see a planet-sized planet in the sky that is an absolutely mind-blowing distance away, and still be able to see details on it and stuff. These are just things that we never deal with in games, you know. We normally have a nice skybox and it's actually only about 100 yards away, you know. And games just aren't, like machines just aren't very good at that kind of thing. And even, you know, like it's the concept of the game is quite cool, I think, but the reality, like, there are moments where you get lost or things unexpected happen, and sometimes that's brilliant, and sometimes you think, oh, I'm enjoying it, but I don't know if other people will. I don't know if this is what people are into or whatever. Everything about the game is a little bit different, so you actually never feel, I certainly never feel comfortable and confident. I'm never like, oh, people are gonna love this, you're like, oh, what about this? And I hope they like that, and I hope this works or whatever. I never, that's, if you're asking what's the most difficult thing about development, like, generally, like, it's fun, but it's always pretty difficult, there's nothing just normal. I never get to do anything that's just like, oh yeah, I could just write this exactly as I used to write it on Burnout or something, It just never applies. The normal rules just never apply. I think that's the biggest thing, is that there's not much of a precedent for some of the stuff, So you are just doing things fresh, and you're doing from scratch, and actually that's a real benefit. So on previous games, you actually, like, if you have a problem, generally if you look online, the solution to that problem is pretty much out there, like, to some degree, right? If you want to have whatever, generating an AI navigation mesh or something like that, right? Like, that's normally there, right? In our game, if you search for, like, generate an AI navigation mesh, like, without any human interaction, for creatures of any size, through something that's being just generated on the fly, that has forests that span, hundreds of kilometers, like, it just hasn't been done, so it's just a unique problem. But the really nice side of that is that you get to, like, look up papers and things like that. We've used, I think, a lot more on this game than anything I've worked on previously. I will get to read, like, some SIGGRAPH papers or some obscure GDC papers or things like that, and implement stuff, and that's just much more fun than copying and pasting something,
How has the reception of No Man's Sky, since you unveiled it, changed your perception of the industry in general?
Oh, wow. What a question. So one of the biggest moments for me was we announced the game at VGX. We were on a real high, and like, we broke up for Christmas in just a really good place, and we got, like, flooded here in this office and got pretty much wiped out. And it was, like, a really tough couple of days, basically. And, we tried not to let ourselves get too down about it and stuff like that, and I feel like we did bounce back and stuff. But the thing that blew me away was, like, the internet and people on the internet and the industry in general, just how, like, supportive people were, like, how much they really cared and offered help and things like that. And, like, gamers and the internet and stuff like that amongst developers often gets, like, a hard time, and people will say, oh, don't read the comments, and people will say, like, oh, like, the average consumer is a tough audience or whatever, but, like, that blew me away, that actually when it comes down to it, like, there was such goodwill and such positivity behind it and stuff, and that, like, that really changed it for me, actually. Anytime now that if I see a negative comment or something like that on the internet or from anyone in the industry or something like that, I just say, like, oh, they're good underneath it though, like, they don't mean it, like genuinely, that has been a big thing for me,
But do you think you would have gotten that same reaction if you're working on Joe Danger 3?
um, that was a strange thing. Like we were looking at this on like when we came to announce No Man's Sky at BGX's, they were asking us to put like a Hello Games logo at the start of No Man's Sky. And we were kind of saying, I don't think Hello Games is that well known kind of thing. And if it is, it's known for like Joe Danger. So we probably don't gain anything by like putting a logo on at the start. And we kind of thought like, nobody knows who we are. So we hadn't put logos on some of our other trailers. So we're just like, who cares, right? Then as it was announcing, it was like, a lot of the titles were like Joe Danger developers to announce new game or whatever. And then pretty much the day after VGX, and especially when we flooded, we were never called Joe Danger developers. We were like No Man's Sky developers flooded and all that kind of thing. And it had changed. Even like, 3 years of making Joe Danger was like wiped out that day kind of thing. And it felt really weird. I didn't know how to feel about it because I'm like, No Man's Sky isn't out. Like I haven't done anything yet as far as you guys are concerned, Like when you play it and if it's good and you like it, then call us No Man's Sky developers. Like we are Joe Danger developers. That's the thing we've done so far. So yeah, I always feel a little bit weird about that. And I think like, I wonder how, like how much, like say when we were flooded and things like that, you were saying like, would we have gotten as much help and things like that? I'll never know, but I sort of get the feeling that we've always been this kind of stupid, scrappy underdog, and people probably liked that anyway, and probably would have supported us, I don't think No Man's Sky is actually, people might like it and be excited about it, but I don't think it's actually changed their perception of us or whether they'd be willing to help us or something like that,
Do you feel a different reaction just from large publishers? Does it feel like, oh, now people with money are super interested in trying to influence us in a strange way? Has it changed your perspective of the industry that way?
Yeah, I think we're definitely, we're more probably on the map and things like that, and more known. And I guess me, just from being on stage at E3 and stuff, probably, and cameras pointed at me and stuff, probably know a little bit more who we are. But generally, all we've had about No Man's Sky has been pretty much very positive, Yeah. There's a whole like commercial side to the industry that we've never really understood, never really kind of done that well or whatever. We tend to, like, as should probably be obvious, we tend to focus on the game. Like Joe Danger was actually kind of the first self-published like console game, pretty much. Like we kind of brought that out ourselves, published it ourselves and stuff like that. Similarly Joe Danger 2 and things like that. Like No Man's Sky, we haven't asked anyone for funding, we haven't gone on Kickstarter, we haven't done anything like that. Generally we just kind of get on and make the game, and maybe we should be like, I don't know, we should be doing pre-orders or something like that. I don't know, but we don't. We just don't think about that,
You must have had publishers trying to court you, though, to try and publish the game after all that buzz, right?
Yeah. We've definitely had people who were like interested in working with us in loads of different ways. And sometimes I think, maybe we should have somebody who's much more sensible and does these things much better than us, generally. I think we kind of just blaze our own kind of path without really thinking, and so maybe we should have someone much more mature than us to help us out, and I think that might be a good thing. But overall, we don't give it too much thought, to be honest.
Did you kind of feel like you're in the middle of a bidding war between Microsoft and Sony to some extent, though?
That's a good question. So, like, I think, we just had a weird situation where we had announced at VGXs without ever telling anyone about the game. And normally, Sony and Microsoft and things like that, you would come to them first before you would announce. So we just kind of did our own thing and announced, and then people seemed to like it. And then we just started chatting a bit more with them, For us, it's really simple. Like, we had really good relationship with Sony previously. Joe Danger was on PS3 first and things like that, and we had worked with them, good relationship. And so we kind of personally knew people there. They wanted us to be on stage at E3 and kind of saw the game. I think not for what it was at the time, but maybe what it could be. And so that was kind of it was a route that just formed really naturally,
So you mentioned that you're self-publishing this one. Is it as expensive as it looks to create? Do you have other investors? Is this just Joe Danger money that's creating this?
Joe Danger money, I love that phrase now. So to make Joe Danger, we tried to find a publisher. We tried to find somebody to fund us and give us money. And probably correctly, no one would do that for us. They were too sensible. So we ran out of money, and I sold my house at the time to kind of fund it. And that put us in a good position, and Joe Danger did well, a lot of developers seem to talk about numbers and how many units they sold and things like that, and we just never really get into that. But it did well enough for us, that we were happy and that we could make this game that we wanted to make, which called No Man's Sky now, and that we worked on for a bunch of time, and it allows us to do what we're doing. We just haven't really considered going out and looking for money and things. We might run out, I don't know.
That's why you have to ship it at some point.
Yeah, we'll have to ship it at some point. That's probably a good thing. No Man's Sky, I guess, when it announced, was kind of known as 4 people. Hello Games was a bit bigger at the time. Hello Games was about 10 people, 9 or 10, and there was 4 of us kind of squirreled away working on it. And we did that for about a year. And then after VGX, since then, over this last year, we've brought people on kind of one at a time from that team. There's about 11 at Hello Games now. Not all of us are working on No Man's Sky, but we're getting close to that. So yeah, we're still a pretty small team kind of thing.
So it's not ultimately that expensive to make the game, because you're just paying for 11 salaries, which is expensive, I'd imagine, but not bank-breaking, right?
To me, when you're doing it personally, it's really expensive, you know what I mean? And people are always really surprised by Kickstarters, you know what I mean? Kickstarters, they will say what? They're asking for all this money to make a game? And I will sit there and nod and be it's really expensive to make a game, You're making me think about it right now, but I try not to think about it, ultimately people bought Joe Danger, and whether they liked it or not, they weren't just buying the game, that was an investment in us, and that's kind of the way I look at it, this sounds stupid, but I worked at EA and got paid there and brought out games and bought a house, and when I sold that house, it was I joked that was EA money, and I was just putting it back into the gaming pool, And it's a similar thing here. They've bought the game. I think a lot of developers might have taken more of that for themselves, and I think that would have been a really understandable thing to do. We saw it as this really precious resource, that was gonna allow us to have creative freedom and do something a bit different or whatever. Yeah. So that helps us sleep at night.
Do you worry at all about the success of No Man's Sky? If it does really well, not saying it's going to be the next Minecraft, but I think enough people are interested in this game that there's a good chance it'll do well.
I worry about like disappointing people, you know. Like we are gonna deliver on everything that we said, you know, I hope. That's certainly the plan, but you know, the interest around the game, some people might expect things that aren't in the game, you know, that aren't in any game or, you know, whatever, because the game sounds quite ambitious. So they might presume there are other things that, you know, just sometimes can't even possibly exist, you know. And so sometimes you worry about that, about the game coming out and like disappointing those people, you know, or something like that. But in general, I don't worry about it being too successful. No, that's not a thing that's ever worried me before.
So you like having this size of team, though? You aren't banking on like, oh, we're really going to expand once this game comes out and if it's profitable?
No, I like working with a really small team. Like that's, I think actually everybody in the world probably has their ideal size to work with. And I think for some people, they like to be, you know, working in a really large team and they get a kick out of being hundreds of people or whatever. And some people can only work on their own. And like, I can't do that, you know. There's a certain size of team that I get a real kick out of working with. And that's about the size we are now. If the game was really successful, I would want to support that and I'd want to support the community. And if we did have to, you know, get more people in order to do that, then I'm sure we'd do that, you know. But I'd probably find a way to be in just a room with a small number of people still, you know. But I'm kind of convinced that you don't need loads of people. I'm pretty convinced of that actually the constraints of having a small number are quite good actually and quite healthy sometimes.
Even outside of the procedural world?
Yeah, definitely. I think like you look at indie games, right? Like a lot of indie games over the last few years have been my, you know, favorite gaming moments. And they've just done things in a slightly different way because they have constraints. You know, they haven't like, and even if they had loads of money and larger team, I'd rather that they still made the game that they were going to make anyway. You know, I don't think every game gets better by adding loads of people, you know, or loads of capabilities in that way. So I'm personally pretty convinced that like by deciding, okay, we have this really big thing to do, but how can we do it with like 3 people or 10 people or whatever, then you probably make really good decisions in terms of like focus and, you know, and focusing on like what's actually important kind of thing.
Do you have a message for the people that are really anticipating it? You talk about like wanting to check expectations at a certain level, but do you just have like a message for those people about how excited they should be? What level, where should they cap off their excitement? And this becoming like their next religion, probably.
Oh God. No, I like. I grew up like being. I always had one game that I was super into. I actually enjoyed the process of being really into a game before it came out, you know, and being on all the forums and stuff like that, and like, you know, I think back to some incredibly cringy and cheesy things I probably said before the release of Quake on some like BBS board somewhere or something like that. But you know, I actually enjoy that process. It's a healthy process, and if we are that for anyone, then that's pretty cool actually. I hope we can live up to it a little bit. You know, there's no I don't want to say to anyone like, you know, you need to manage your expectations, don't expect this or this or this. Like I should, but in some ways their expectations kind of fire me up a bit, you know, and you kind of think, yeah, I have to like deliver on that and do something cool and do something interesting. So